What's going on, everybody? Sorry it's been a while since my last Friday the 13th review. I had to go out of state for some business. Oh man, Friday the 13th part 6, baby. You guys have been asking for this one for a while, man. Been looking forward to this one. So, if any of you guys are a fan of Drum Dums or Will I Like It reviews, unfortunately, Lee and CP had a message that they wanted me to get to you guys. They've ran into some copyright issues, and they're not going to be online for a while. So don't sit at your computer desk waiting for new videos for them, because they don't know when they're going to be back. So the rest of this ride is just me and you guys. Oh, shit. So Jason Lives. What can we say? Friday the 13th, Jason Lives tells the story of... You know what, guys? I'm sorry. I thought I could do this, but it's just not right. I can't do this review the way I am. Something's just missing. So Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, tells the story of Tommy Jarvis accidentally resurrecting Jason Voorhees and spending the rest of the movie trying to put that big fucker back in the ground. Welcome back, everybody, to the Friday the 13th review series. Jason Lives is the installment that I've been looking forward to doing the most, because not only is this the one that I probably see alongside number 4 as being everyone's favorite of the franchise for the most part, but from my own memory of watching this for the first time about a year and a half ago, yeah, I know. You could shit all over me in the comments. I saw this movie for the first time about a year and a half ago. From my own memory, this was one of the more fun and enjoyable installments of this franchise. Well, after Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning tanked with critics and really tanked with fans, Paramount knew that little ace in the hole they stuck in their back pocket, Jason Voorhees, needed to be brought back onto the screen to rejuvenate this franchise. I think they already knew they were going to bring him back eventually. I mean, these movies were like a year apart, less than a year apart in some of the cases. So there's not that much time for planning to say, like, what are we going to do? Oh, I guess we can bring Jason back. Motherfucker, you knew you were going to bring Jason back. But Jason Lives brought Jason back. It's actually the first time you get to see quote-unquote zombie Jason. It's the first time you actually had to resurrect Jason, aside from just having him stand up and say, yeah, that little axe in the head shit, you hit like a bitch. I'm still alive. So Jason Lives kicks off with a resurrection scene, and it's honestly one of my favorite resurrection scenes in slashers, because a resurrection scene is a very subtle art. It can be a really cool scene and a good way to bring back a character effectively that doesn't draw too many questions. Or it can be one of the most baffling, meme-worthy, shitty scenes in a movie. Looking at you, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. And writer and director Tom McLoughlin really paid a lot of tribute to Frankenstein, not only with this resurrection scene, but with Jason himself in this movie, and with a lot of subtle nods throughout the film. There's a Karloff store, there's a lot of other kind of Frankenstein tipping its hat little references for you old school horror fans, which is a nice little touch. And speaking on director and writer Tom McLoughlin, first time you have one person as kind of the main guy writing and directing and just leading the creative force in Friday the 13th movie. So one guy, his vision, and I think that really worked to this movie's advantage and worked to the advantage of us viewers, because we get a very coherent, well shot, and well constructed movie that has a very different tone than the first 4 movies, especially since they have a very Friday the 13th template. This one went for much more of self-referential, meta, and it just has a lot of fun with the concept of Friday the 13th and Jason. And by the time that you get to Part 6 in this franchise, especially if you're marathoning them, Woo, that change of tone is a huge breath of fresh air. And one of the reasons it was such a huge breath of fresh air for me and my own enjoyment coming in as a very casual Friday the 13th fan is that it's really stale after a while how serious they take themselves with these Friday the 13th movies, even though it is totally schlocky and it's totally goofy and totally ridiculous in some spots. You know, it's almost like the directors of those movies had people in their ear like, hey, you know this is kind of stupid, right? What? Shut the fuck up. We're being serious here, all right? We're trying to do Halloween. Asshole. But whenever Tom McLoughlin got a hold of this one, it's like he already knew. He's like, you know what? This shit's kind of stupid. Let's have fun with that. And one of the bigger positives for this movie, too, which is a good credit to Tom McLoughlin, is this is one of the better shot movies in the Friday the 13th franchise. You know, the template of the storyline was also kind of a template in the way that the movies were shot in the first four. Although I think that Joseph Zito did it the best in part four, with having it be much more in the shadows and a little bit more dark and gritty. You know, they all kind of had this same kind of tone throughout all the shots and the camera work and the lighting. You get to part six and it feels like a guy that was really putting a lot of time, energy, and budget into all the technical aspects, like really good lighting and, you know, a lot of different cinematography shots and even stunts whenever they flip a gigantic ass RV. It's all things that weren't really a piece of the Friday the 13th franchise until Jason Lives. Another thing I like about this one is the continuation of the Tommy Jarvis storyline. This is kind of the wrap-up of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, and I like Thom Mathews' performance as Tommy Jarvis. Again, it's probably, if you take a poll, most times people point towards Thom Mathews as their preferred kind of interpretation of the character of Tommy Jarvis. I still prefer Corey Feldman a little bit just because I got a soft spot for that kid whenever he was in the 80s, but Thom Mathews is a very, very great follow-up to that Corey Feldman storyline. And you can really see, if you take like this, you know, this hunting movie trying to take out the monster, it's a nice little change of pace, and it really does make for a nice character change to have somebody that you can root for and follow in this movie and cheer on, versus just having Jason take out a random group of teenagers and whatever one you like the most you hope is the final girl. Speaking of Jason, I like the performance of C.J. Graham as Jason in this. It's a nice continuation of the Richard Brooker and Ted White Jason, kind of that more meaty, visceral Jason that's just out there to cause as much pain as possible, has a really intimidating presence. I like his take on the character. I don't quite put him up there with Ted White, and honestly, I think I prefer Richard Brooker even just a little bit more than C.J. Graham, but I enjoy what he brings to the character, including the kills. There is some good kills in Friday the 13th Part 6. Unfortunately, this is when the MPAA started, you know, swinging their dick around and making a lot of kills in slashers, especially kind of cutaways and taking a lot of the blood out and making them use camera tricks to bring the rating down a little bit. So there's a lot of kind of blue balls kills in this movie, unfortunately, but and some weird spots too, if I can be honest, because like the movie opens up with the first money shot kill where Jason just pushes the dude's heart through the back of his body and just holds it there in front of the camera. But you get to a triple decapitation scene, and I guess the kids couldn't handle that one. But nonetheless, there's a lot of kills and there's a lot of cool kills. They have a lot of fun with the kills in this movie. You got the one where, you know, the woman's face is pushed through the metal in the RV. You got the famous one that a lot of people love and a lot of people point to this movie for, where the sheriff is folded backwards in half. A lot of great stuff. If you are here for the kills, which most people who watch Friday the 13th is here for the kills deliver. And I gotta be honest, as far as the comedy, it's something that they've always tried to inject a little bit into the Friday the 13th movies. It succeeds the most in Jason Lives because they went at it as somewhat of a horror comedy. They went for that tone. The comedy doesn't feel foreign, it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel overwritten or badly written. It actually feels like it's a part of the movie, a part of those cogs that are moving this movie along. And there's some genuinely good laughs here and there. So it's not full-blown horror comedy, but they're having fun with the movie. They throw the comedy in, and it does not distract from that fun one bit. Oh yeah, I mean, we're talking about awesome things with this movie. The soundtrack. That's right, people. He's back. The man behind the mask is a part of the soundtrack for Jason Lives, written and performed by the great Alice Cooper. I've always been a huge Alice Cooper fan. He was one of my biggest influences and one of my biggest kind of gateway drugs into rock and metal, honestly. So he was the first artist that I was obsessed with as a young kid. He was the first concert I ever saw in 2000. He was the third concert in 2003, I believe. So I've always been a huge Alice Cooper fan. And whenever I watch Jason Lives, whenever that soundtrack kicks in, you hear He's Back, you hear Teenage Frankenstein, it just brings a smile to my face. I mean, as somebody who loves music as much as I do, the soundtrack not only adds to the fun that they're having in Jason Lives, but it just totally scratches that metalhead itch that I have, that whenever I hear that song, He's Back, I'm just automatically in a good mood. Oh, and you know what? One thing I should mention before we move Lives. And the fact that kids are at the camp actually gives us a scene that kind of gives an interesting, another little nugget of Jason's psychology. There's a scene where Jason is literally hovering over this little girl in her bed while she's kind of freaking out and praying and just, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And he's standing over her. And I don't know if it's the fact that she's a kid or if it's just, you know, the power of prayer, who knows. But the dude is standing over her. Anybody else would have been dead in a second. And the fact that she's a kid, he backs off and leaves. An interesting little thing there that they still have not kind of, you know, went back to with the Jason Voorhees character. That if I was to write another chapter, like a sequel to the remake or something, I would dive into some of that stuff. That's interesting shit to put into your villain who otherwise is, you know, a one-note killer for the most part. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have a ton of personality. When you give little spots of that, like in part 4, whenever he's dealing with Tommy Jarvis, and scenes like this that kind of get into his psychology, that's good stuff. Give us more of that stuff. Now, moving on to the negatives. As much as I enjoy the CJ Graham performance of Jason Voorhees, I gotta admit, I don't love the look. Not a fan of the Carpenter Jason, not a fan of the Home Depot Jason. You know, he's got like a little tool belt and the yellow gloves and shit. I don't know why. It's weird to me. It's the only time in the series that he kind of has that sort of apparel, and it just feels a little bit odd to me. Even though he's still an intimidating presence, not my favorite look. Not for me. Also, you know, while the kills might satisfy your Friday the 13th fans out there, there's absolutely zero nudity in this movie. I don't know if I could call that a full-on negative or not, because I don't want to piss anybody off. Actually, I do. I love doing that. But there is no nudity in a Friday the 13th movie. That just seems so weird to say out loud. It's part of the formula, people. You got to have at least one boob in the background somewhere. It's just, it's part of the requirements. It's a box you have to check. I'm sorry. I didn't write the rules.
I happen to know that in the whole school, there's only one other titty quite this pretty.
Oh, really? Well, where are they at? There's some good supporting characters in this movie as well, like Megan, who's technically, I guess, your final girl for this. Even though Tom Matthews gets the focus, she's the last one alive that's kind of assisting Tom Matthews throughout the last half of this movie. She's a really cool character because as soon as she shows up in the movie, she's got this edge to her and this attitude that gives her some personality, that makes her stand out amongst the crowd. I really enjoy in the third act whenever she really teams up with Tommy and she's breaking them out and, you know, they're driving around. They have that cool little sequence with, you know, great 80s music. I love all of that. I wish we could get more of those two characters, but, you know, unfortunately we didn't pass this one. But for what they give us in Jason Lives, I think that those two work really well together. And really my only other negative is just kind of a nitpick for me, and it's one of those moments where you think a little bit too hard in a Friday the 13th movie. For Tom Matthews' Tommy Jarvis to be so hell-bent on destroying and killing Jason once and for all, it seems a little bit underwhelming, the climax that we get. Even though it looks great, it's shot great, and it's cool to see Jason with that, you know, chain around his neck, which we see more of in the next one, getting drugged down into Camp Crystal Lake, and, you know, he gets the little fan blades stuck into his skull and all that kind of shit. Really cool how it looks, but the fact that Tommy Jarvis is so hell-bent on it to the point where even though he's rotting in the ground in a casket, he's still not convinced that Jason is dead, so he stabs him, accidentally resurrects him, but somehow he's okay at the end with just making sure that he's weighted down and stuck at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake where nobody can see him for now. Seems a little bit weird to me. Seems a little bit like there should have been another chapter with Tommy Jarvis coming back to make sure he was still dead again, or, you know, something a little bit more final about Jason's death, even though we know it wasn't going to be the last time we saw Jason, just enough to make it believable that Tommy Jarvis believed that he was dead. But other than that, guys, I think this is a really fun installment in the Friday the 13th franchise. I think that whenever it goes for the comedy and it goes for that lighter tone, they really nail it. I think you get a really good Jason. You got a great Tom Matthews performance as Tommy Jarvis and a great little crescendo to the whole Tommy Jarvis trilogy, a great showdown between those two characters, and a nice way to bring Jason back in a fun way that kind of, you know, strikes lightning into the heart of this franchise, pun intended. So if you're a fan of Friday the 13th franchise and you were disappointed that Part 5 did not have Jason in it, fear not, because Jason is back. He is the man behind the mask. Check out Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of Friday the 13th Part 6? Is this your favorite, your second favorite, your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth favorite? Whatever it is, tell me down below. Do you like the more comedic, meta, self-referential tone in this? Or does it feel weird in the franchise to you? What do you think of CJ Graham? What do you think of Tom Matthews? Everything about this movie, put it in the comment section below, guys, and we'll talk about it. Oh, and throw some Alice Cooper love down there too, baby. If you guys like this video, please hit that like button, hit that share button, and hit that subscribe button if you are not already a subscriber. If you want to check out my social media links, down in the video description below, you'll find Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt, a new Spreadshirt store. Definitely check that out, and my Patreon page. A great way to give back to this channel, help it grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. And if you guys want to check out some more of my videos, including the rest of this Friday the 13th review series, you can check that out by clicking right over here.